So in case you climbed out of a rock and I was the first person you saw, which welcome back to the world, Donkey Kong got a redesign in Mario Kart 9 or 10. We're going to find out soon enough, I think, unless they give a different name entirely. That series is wacky about naming conventions. Yeah, one of the big news to come out of that reveal trailer was that Donkey Kong looks way different. A lot of people are saying that it looks like the movie Donkey Kong, and I disagree entirely. I don't think that it looks anything like the movie Donkey Kong. I think the reason why people say this is because his eyes have a softer look to them. When Rare redesigned Donkey Kong for Donkey Kong Country way back in the day, it was Kevin Bayliss who redesigned Donkey Kong, and his art style actually kind of goes as far back as Battletoads. If you look at the eyes of the Battletoads versus Donkey Kong's eyes in Donkey Kong Country, you might notice that they look almost identical or very, very similar. That's because Kevin Bayliss worked on both properties, and so he just gave them the Battletoad eyes in his own words. Now Nintendo wants to redesign him, clearly, because that's how he looks in this new game that's coming out. And on top of that, in some of the illustrated media for Donkey Kong, they've really softened him up quite a bit. And then also, if you look at him in the movie, like I said earlier, they softened him up quite a bit there as well. The movie version looks like a hybrid between Kevin Bayliss's design and the last time we saw like classic Donkey Kong, which was Donkey Kong 1994. In that, he had like red around his eyes, but he did not have like the furrowed brow and the black around his eyes. Like, I guess a shadow cast is what it's supposed to be. So it's sort of like a mix between the two to make the movie version, and I kind of like it. I don't hate it, but this new one is kind of different. It's still like the black shadow cast, but instead of like furrowing the brow, it's more like a goggle sort of thing going on, and his eyes just look like two ping pong balls that are inside of that concave shadow cast eye socket thing. It's very, very strange. But why did Nintendo decide to do this? I have a theory. My theory is that Nintendo has wanted to soften up DK for quite a while as far as a character goes. So they've been using the old school design for quite a long time. Very impressive stuff, and I'm super, super proud that someone outside of Japan could redesign an iconic character and have that image stick for as long as it did. But let's be honest, DK looks kind of mean and kind of tough with that redesign. He certainly looks a lot cooler, and I think that's really what the intention was for Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country is a cool game. So, like, it starts off with Donkey Kong throwing a freaking boombox on top of the old Cranky Kong to kind of make a division of generation and make him seem cool and the old school Donkey Kong seem lame. That's the whole purpose of that intro, and I think the whole purpose of the game is to give DK just more coolness. I think that, like, the way that the levels are set up and the music and everything, it's not supposed to be like Sonic the Hedgehog levels of edgy, but I do think that they were trying to harden up DK so that it seemed cooler to kids. So, like, the environments, the way that DK acted and behaved, like, yeah, there's a little bit of goofiness to the character. There's a little bit of humor thrown into the game as well. But there's just cool things, like when DK would beat his chest, you could just hear the echoing scream of an actual gorilla. Whereas, now look at Donkey Kong. It's some dude going... You know, like, they really, like, try to make him, like, more, like, you know, suitable for small children. And I wonder why Nintendo decided to go this route, but ultimately, this is what they've been trying to do for a long time. They've been trying to make DK seem more goofy and dopey, but still strong. So, like, his three main qualities that Nintendo wants you to have is that he is a oafish, dopey, funny character, but he also has the characteristic of strength. So he sometimes flexes his ability to use strength as a character, but ultimately, like, he's not like the badass sort of character that Rare sort of established with Donkey Kong Country 1. And so I think now Nintendo, rather than realizing, you know what, part of the appeal of Donkey Kong Country was that DK was cool, and that his environments were cool, and that the music was cool. Instead of leaning into that and understanding that that was what made the first game so popular, Nintendo instead, I think, has a different approach to this. I think that they like the original Donkey Kong arcade version of DK. My theory is that I think that they also just want Donkey Kong to fit in better with the Mario crew. I think like when Mario does Mario Party or Mario Kart, like we're seeing here now with this redesign and everything, I think that what they really want at the end of the day is for DK to be able to pal around with Mario and Luigi and Princess Peach and Yoshi a lot better than it would be if like they maintained the hard, edgy, cool kind of Donkey Kong that we got at Donkey Kong Country. I think that's why they've been changing up his personality. I think they've been trying to soften him up personality-wise, and now they finally feel comfortable enough after trying to cement that personality for so many years with Donkey Kong Country Returns and stuff like that, that we're finally seeing the actual physical appearance of Donkey Kong change a little bit to match that of a softer, dopier Donkey Kong. So that's why I think we might be having a new redesign of the character. I think that's been a long game plan for Nintendo. If you played the original Donkey Kong Country and then saw that initial trailer for Donkey Kong Country Returns, you were probably one of many people that were kind of like, this is a little bit bright and cheerful and colorful for a Donkey Kong Country game, don't you think? Like literally everything else about Donkey Kong Country Returns just completely blows the original game out of the water. Like there's just so many features, so many unique levels, and it's just got a great tight gameplay, and it builds off of the original Donkey Kong Country. I love Donkey Kong Country Returns and Tropical Freeze to death, and I think I would play those over the original Donkey Kong Country, but I would still say to this day that if they made a third Returns version of Donkey Kong Country, I would much prefer like the aesthetic that they were going for with the original Donkey Kong Country. I would much prefer the DK that they kind of built up in their heads and put onto the game cartridge in Donkey Kong Country than what we're getting here, where it's like better suited for small children. Not to say that it can't be appreciated by all. I mean, that's the whole aspect of Nintendo's business philosophy, which is to have games that are appreciated by the whole family. People my age and people that are as young as like 6 years old and stuff. It's supposed to hit every single generation. And that's Nintendo's core plan. But I think that Nintendo kind of forgets that little kids love the idea of growing up fast. They love the idea of being a teenager before they're a teenager. So that's why they gravitate towards characters like Sonic the Hedgehog and stuff like that, because they think it's cool. And same thing with Donkey Kong Country. I don't think that kids prefer to have something that feels like it's pandering to them. I think that they prefer to have something that feels like it's pandering to kids older than them, because they always, like a lot of boys at least, have an aspiration to feel a bit older or cooler than they actually are at 6 years old and stuff like that. I don't know, Nintendo, if you're listening to this, like, I really think you should bring back the edgy Donkey Kong. That's actually my 2 cents, but also at the end of the day, Donkey Kong is kind of, he was originally meant to be like a dopey sort of like Bluto character from Popeye sort of deal, where he's supposed to be like oafish and brutish, but also kind of a little dopey too. So he's kind of had an identity crisis for decades now, so it doesn't hurt me to see that they've redesigned him for Mario Kart 9 or 10 or whatever. I think that it's fine. I kind of like seeing the character played around with a little bit. So if Nintendo's, not going to commit to the cooler Donkey Kong Country Donkey Kong, then fine. Like, mess around with him a little bit. Because, I mean, ultimately, personality-wise, he hasn't been the same DK for decades. And I've had plenty of time to just get over that. I think that once people start to realize, yeah, wait a second, DK has been a very different character over the years, I think it's going to be a little bit easier for everybody else to accept the fact that this redesign is happening too. I think that some people actually like the redesign, period, bar none, like whatever. And frankly, like, yeah, as far as like a softened DK, I kind of like this overtly dopey version. Like I think I described it earlier. He just looks like a character wearing goggles, and then someone placed 2 ping pong balls and used a Sharpie to make the pupil. to make his eyes. I completely disagree with people saying like, oh, it's just the movie Donkey Kong. No, I think that like people are just saying that because yes, there's a softer looking Donkey Kong in the movie, and so when they see a softer looking Donkey Kong in Mario Kart next, I'm just gonna say that at this point, I think that's where they kind of like draw the similarities and say like, oh, same thing. He's not like looking like a badass anymore, therefore it's the same design. No, it's definitely not. Anyways, guys, thank you for listening to me rant about Donkey Kong for 10 minutes. You know, this is the ladies I try to date in my life, they don't let me do this. So I appreciate you letting me do it instead here on YouTube. Thanks. All right. Anyways, subscribe if you can. That'd be cool.